So before we dive into the big art talk, the big art thing, we got a lot of things to talk about the art thing. I want to make a quick announcement and say, oh my God, I have finally figured out this connection between the energy forecasting, the somatic money, body-based money relationship work, and the art. Like when Spirit Team had me do this hard right-hand turn this summer, with the art revolution and then dropping the psychic notes. Are you kidding me? And like they've had me make some very hard choices the last 40 days. But it's all beginning to come into clarity. And so there's like really 3 pillars going on: energy forecasting, a little bit of psychic notes piggyback there, the somatic money oracle and body-based money relationship, and then the art. And as that's come into clarity, I have started asking, like I've gone through so much deep questioning, you guys, you have no idea. But as this is coming into clarity, I've been having these questions about, I can kind of see the similarities, but really guys, really Spirit Team, why am I doing these 3 things? Energy forecasting, body-based money relationship, and art. That is such an odd hodgepodge, right? Somewhat related. Well, I had an experience in the last couple days and it blew wide open into Technicolor. And I am going to be sharing that fairly soon. That I'm beginning to record some things, and I will be sharing some of that next week in videos. And so this is kind of the last video I'll be doing that is its standalone, because I'm going to begin to bring in some of the other things from other videos to weave this all together, because it's all very interrelated. You're going to love it. It's amazing. It's fantastic. So I just want to leave that with you as a little bit of a teaser. And let's go ahead and take a look at the art share, the voting, and I want to begin to see your artwork too. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. Super grateful for everyone who voted with that art share that I did yesterday. If you haven't seen it, the video's right here. It's the one previous to this. And I want to share with you which artwork was the favorite. So let's go take a look. All right, so let's take a look. Oh, sleeping kitty, there's Leo. Yeah, so yesterday I ran an art share and asked people to vote. Thank you for voting and weighing in on what you liked. And this art piece right here, this one seemed to be the most popular and won out. Like there was a range of people that liked all the different kinds of artwork, but this one seemed to get the most attention and get voted on the most. And kind of surprised that this got some attention as well too, which I kind of love, because to me this is like, I really was in a meditative space when I did this, and I just feel like the energy is in that painting. So thanks for voting. I've got prints up on my Shopify if you're interested at all. And then Spirit Team was very clear. They wanted me to show this one. So this is when they were beginning to introduce to me like more of art as meditation. And I kind of sort of knew that. And, I've heard about art as meditation, but really hadn't jumped into the deep end of the pool on it. And this piece right here, I'm feeling very much like they walked me through that. When I sat down, I could very clearly hear, I put the tape down, and then they wanted me to do this minty blue-green wash that I did in the background, and then I did certain dots of certain colors, and then they had me do other dots, and then they had me fill in the dots. And so, it turned out to be this beautiful washy color thing. And I didn't, when I got done with it, I was like, oh, that's kind of nice. I didn't think much about it. And then I sat back and looked at it, and I found myself like my breathing was even. And like the next couple of mornings when I came in and sat with it, I was like, oh, that's calming me down. And so when I want to calm down, I come look at this piece of artwork. This piece of artwork helps calm me down. So I've been wanting to do this anyway, and part of me is like, duh, why didn't I think about this earlier? But I would love it if you would like to share some of your artwork. Now, on TikTok, I know you can do a direct share. I think you can on Blue Sky and Skylight as well. YouTube, I don't know how we would do that. I think you'd have to post it and then put a link in the comment section that links to your artwork. But I would either love to see a couple things. Either like share your artwork that you're working on right now and tell us about it, or share your favorite piece of artwork that you've done, or share one of your art pieces that you find as meditative for you. So it's like we're doing art here, so like, of course I should be asking about your art, and I'm so sorry I didn't ask sooner. So like, either post an image or post a link to an image depending on what platform you're on, and let's share our art so we can see one another's art. I think that would be lovely for all of us to be sharing our art here in digital world, right? To see one another's art. That's kind of the point, right? So the rhythm of these videos is kind of working out as like art share. Now we're doing my art share, your art share, and then like themey part of something, and then story. All right, so this is the theme. The theme is that idea of like, and this goes back to, you know, earlier generational stuff. I don't know that it's going on so much right now, but I definitely remember it being a thing as I was growing up. And it's that thing of like, there could only be one of something in a family. Like, you know, there could only be one comedian, or there could only be one singer, or there could only be one artist, or there could only be one, you know, you name it and fill in the blank. And I think that was an ideology and a way of thinking. And I remember this so much that, and this is, I've got to be sensitive to racism here, but I think it's worth pointing out. And this came up, I was watching a biopic on Black comedians, like within the last year or so. But they were talking about how, you know, when Bill Cosby owned the Black comedian scene, basically. And then you had comedians like Richard Pryor coming along, and then you had a comedian like Eddie Murphy coming along. And I remember as a little kid, this was the nonverbal in the air, and these Black comedians actually spoke to it. And it was the thing of like, we were all, you know, white community was also focused on like Bill Cosby is the primary Black male comedian. And then you see Eddie Murphy coming along. And I think white people got confused because we were like, wait a minute, there can only be one Black male comedian. That was the nonverbal in the room. That was the racist nonverbal in the room. And I remember that as a kid. I remember that as a kid growing up in the 70s and the 80s, right? So the thing about being the only one, there's only room for one. I think that ideology of there's only room for one, that was in the family too. And so it trickled into artistry. So like there could only be one artist in the family. There was only room for one artist. Now we know that's not true right now. Like we've blown that box wide open, and we know there are multiples in a family, right? We know this, but you know, in earlier generations and being a Gen Xer earlier in Gen X, I remember that being a thing. And I can see and I can feel how much that affected me with my art. So I've got a story to tell, but I also want to set the stage in that there were two primary people in my life that I felt preceded me as artists, and because they were the predominant artists, there wasn't room for me to be an artist. And the first one was my mother. Now, my relationship with my mother, our relation, is incredibly complicated. At this point, it's over. Like I called it early. I think the success that my mom and I had in our relationship is this lifetime. We did not kill one another. I think that's our success this lifetime. And I arrived at a certain point where I realized I could no longer be in the relationship because it was just causing me damage and more damage, even as I was trying to heal. And I arrived at a place, and this was like 2018-ish. I arrived at a place. I was supposed to see my parents at some point for a lunch. They had come over the Western Slope, and my ex Bob and I we were supposed to meet up with them and have lunch. And the morning of that, like my legs, I literally collapsed in the kitchen. Like my body could no longer support my weight to go see my parents. And so at that point, like I knew, like, oh, I've gone as far as I can go. I've done everything that I can do this lifetime, and that relationship is over. So that will give you an idea of the type of environment that I've lived through with my mother for a very long time. And so her holding that position of being the artist in the family, that was non-verbally questioned. I mean, she was a painter for a while, and then she was a drawer for a while. She went to architecture school. Like, she filled up that space. The only space I was allowed to have any kind of art was calligraphy with her. I was expected to sew. I learned how to sew, and then I took my artistry in that direction, and that was acceptable. I mean, you get the undertone of this, what was acceptable and what was not acceptable. And then, I played with some ceramics along the way. I remember like the color wash, the watercolor, the color wash, that always seemed to be coming through in different areas. But I never, ever, ever considered that I could paint, that I could draw, that I was any kind of artist. And the stumbling points that I did have with art, like I remember being in middle school art class and those tempera paints making me nauseous. Like I was expected to paint and create art there, and the paint made me nauseous, and then there's 35 kids in the classroom, and I could not get the color to do what I wanted it to do, and I didn't have the knowledge to know how to do that. And so I felt very much like my skill level wasn't connecting with what I wanted to do. Like, this is kind of a theme that happened for me along the way. And so there's this whole thing going on of somebody else in the family that was holding a lot of trauma in the family with me was holding the art energy. And I got the scraps of, what do you do with color? What do you do with texture? Photography. I was allowed, I was able to carve out a space with some photography, which was significant. That is art. I did that for a while. And in high school, I was on yearbook staff. So graphic design was beginning to kick in fairly early for me. So all the little pieces and parts. Oh, and I was a writer. Like, I was the one, I took up the air in the family as, quote unquote, the writer. Nobody else was the writer. Dana was the writer. So that's kind of how things rolled. I mean, it was, Midwest rules, trauma, not talked about, totally boomer Gen X scene going on. And so I came out of all of that, and I had a few things intact. I had my poetry and my writing and that going, and I had some photography going, and I had my sewing and artistry going through my sewing, and that was it. That was it. I had no idea, the art revolution that is just, raging out of me right now, the art revolution that's coming out of me right now. I had no idea how much of an artist I was early on. And I didn't have skills. I didn't have tools. I didn't have guidance. I didn't have permission. I literally did not have permission. And so that was the energy soup that I was in for quite some time, and didn't question it. Did not question it at all. And then I landed in my second marriage. Second marriage was a lot better than my first. My first marriage was abusive, and I felt lucky that I was able to get out of that marriage intact. At the time that I left that marriage, I left a toxic job, and I, for the first time, moved away from my family. So I was removing myself out of toxic situations very consciously, and I was tuning in with my intuitive, which is its own art. And so that was beginning to come on. I eventually met Bob. We eventually got married. He became my husband. And Bob was and is an artist. So second major person showing up that was quote unquote the artist. And I don't want to say that he sucked the air out of the room, because that was not his MO at all. That's not the person he is at all. But there was a feeling in the air of he was a photographer and a graphic designer. And so anything that I did with my own graphic design kind of met with his puzzlement and critique. And the photography that happened between the two of us, very rapidly, all of the attention went to him for the photography. And so I stopped taking photos. I was an avid photographer, and I just, in his midst, I stopped taking photos because that thing about there can only be one. Now, did Bob make me stop? No. Did he encourage me? There was a feeling of like, you can do art that isn't in my area. So even though we know it's not true that there can be more of a certain type of person in a family, like you can have a family filled with artists, that's totally viable. But there is still this thing in our country, and I think it's older generations, there still is this thing in the country of like, there can only be one person doing one thing in a family. And so sometimes carving out your own space, like if something really does belong to you, and carving out your own space when it's not fully supported, that can be challenging, especially if that has been the theme and the pattern going on for so long, right? So this sets the whole stage for the story that I'm going to tell. I shared all of that part of the vulnerable story so I can tell this part of the story so you can really see, the undertones and the hues that are going on with it. Well, as my marriage with Bob progressed, he would do these very nonverbal things and gift me art tools out of the blue with no context. And when he would gift me these things, he would be like, isn't this cool? You could do this art and you could do that art. And then the conversation would stop, it would drop. And I think there was kind of an expectation in the air of like, okay, now go do it. And I have no skills. I have no tools. And, I've got in the background, this kind of big scary mother and all the trauma drama that happened. And that's all connected in with the art. And as I have been cruising through my art evolution, and all these memories have been coming back, there's been some very painful stuff come up. And right now, as I'm telling it, it's a little bit kind of painful, funny, haha, but it's like, it was so typical of Bob I think he saw something in me. I think he saw something in me, and he knew my inner artist was there. But, and this is a really vulnerable share right here, but because we were both undiagnosed adult AUDHD spectrum and did not know it, he didn't know how to connect the dots for me to bring me along. And I didn't know how to connect the dots to get it going. And so here he is gifting me these anomalous art tools because I'm not allowed to do the kind of art that I want to because he's already taking up the space. So he's going to encourage me non-verbally to give me these art tools to move along my space. But I have all this trauma and connected with the art and all this shut down. And so he's giving me these tools and I'm like, that's great. And I don't know what to do with them. So guess where they went? They went on the shelf. Like art tools that went on the shelf. And I literally would walk over and pick them up and look at them and go, oh, that's nice. And then set them down and walk away because I had no connectivity. All right, so that should pretty much set the picture for you when, lo and behold, one of the art tools Bob gave me one year for, I can't remember if it was birthday or Christmas, but he gave me these. And if I flipped it, you could see it's watercolor. Well, if you read the print here, these are watercolor pencils. But because I was cruising along at the speed that I was cruising along at, and because this was yet another art tool that I had no context of how to plug in, I looked at them, I acknowledged them. Oh, sweetie, that's so nice. How lovely. And he's like, you can draw pictures and they're watercolor pencils and blah, blah. And it doesn't register. It doesn't register because I am working so hard with Somatic Money to keep us financially afloat. And he's going play with art and there's no connectivity for me because all of my background, he scooched me off of my main art axes, right? And so these, like all the other art tools, got tucked away. I never threw anything out. Like it was precious to me. It was priceless. Kept it, never threw it out. And these got tucked away on the shelf as well. But you know what? I never read the fine print. I saw watercolor pencils and I thought that was the color. I had no idea these were water soluble until a month ago. I have had these for years, and I did not know they were water soluble until a month ago. And when I was going through all of, so I'm having this art revolution, and I'm beginning to realize how much art equipment I actually have, and I'm running around the house going, oh my God, I've got this. I got a color wheel here, and this there, and that there. And I collected all of my art equipment that I've already had, that I've been carrying around for years, that I haven't known what to do with, and it was all there. A lot of this stuff I did not have to buy because I already had it, and I collected it, and lo and behold, there was this. Guess where this was sitting? This was sitting in the thrift store bin because I was ready to take it out because this was connected with Bob, and I was ready to let it go. I still had not read the fine print. So I'm running around the house, and all of a sudden I was like, oh, watercolor pencils, ready to go to the thrift store. Uh-oh, what am I doing? I went and fished them out, brought them back, and I'm like, I put on my glasses, and I'm looking at these watercolor, and I finally read the print underneath. I read professional quality water soluble colored pencils, superior light fastness, matches prism color, thick lead, Verithin, and Art Sticks colored pencils. And I freaking burst into tears, people. And I sat there and I cried, and I cried, and I cried because of so much, because of the lost connectivity within a marriage. And, Bob is a beautiful soul, and he was trying, but because of his AUDHD spectrum stuff, and, Gen X from Boomer and trauma stuff, and me and my AUDHD spectrum stuff and my trauma from Boomer stuff, and it's all locked up and mixed in. And I sat there and I cried for all the lost connections. And I'm no longer talking with Bob, but if I could talk with him right now, I would say, oh my God, honey, I got it. And my watercolor is finally lighting up, and I am going to be able to use these pencils that he gave me so long ago with such good intentions, and he could not verbally help me connect the dots. And all of the blocks inside of me, I could not connect the dots, but I hung on to these long enough, and I finally read the text at the bottom to understand that these are water-soluble pencils that I can do watercolor pictures with, much like I'm doing, in my creation room right now with all of my other artwork. And, I can't tell you, realizing what this was, I can't tell you, people, how painful and how much loss is connected with this. But also, at the same time, I am grabbing hold of some threads that are coming to life that I feel like are saving my life right now. Even though all the lost connections with my second marriage and the neglect that I lived through, there were still some good things there. And oh my God, he was spot on. This is the spot on connect with the watercolor. And I am finally, after all of these years, coming through everything that I've had to come through, and come through healing trauma so I could do my art. Are you kidding me? I'm going to finally be able to use these watercolor pencils that he gifted me so long ago. So this is a pretty long video, but I think the thing is, I'm doing these videos, especially these videos on my front end, I am finding myself crawling through the landscape of where all of my art got blocked up and why, and that it's not just me, that it's a cultural thing woven through our entire culture. And I'm doing with art what I've done with somatic money. I'm crawling through it going oh, right there, that thing, and that thing right here, and that thing right there. And this video is about you know, how the trauma conspired with, you can only be, you know, one person gets to be one thing in the family, that conspired with, you know, AUDHD spectrum disconnects, and it all kind of piled up on like me not being able to get to my art for so many years. And it's finally happening. So at the end of this video, if you've made it all the way through, I would really encourage you to connect with, like, what have you had to come through to make connection with your art, simply because of the toxic patriarchal kind of climate things that have been entrenched within our culture that have not helped us arrive into these spaces. So I would love to hear about that if you would like to share that with me. And yeah, as always, this is what I've got for you for now. Please make sure to keep walking forward to meet those miracles along the way. And I will see you in my next video.